YouTube on, and we're going live. Okay. So, I'm starting to see everybody's comments coming in now. If you're watching this in the replay, then make sure to click below. I'm going to have timestamps from what we've been talking about today, so that you can go straight into any questions that you happen to have. I want to make sure that I'm seeing absolutely everything here. I got Patrick from Dubai. And oh, great, excellent. I'm seeing the YouTube comments coming in now. And I'm also today testing out the super chat feature on YouTube. So if you feel that your comment, you want to bring it to the top, just use that option. And the moderator, Holly, is going to be jumping in and helping people get through whatever they can. And I will be taking her suggestions for questions, as well as whatever I see popping up here on the side. I do want to make sure I've got, okay. All right. So, yeah, I'm seeing YouTube comments twice here, but that's fine. Whatever. Okay, so let me see what you guys have been saying here. The first question that I saw pop in was from JTB, and that question on YouTube was, what was your biggest help in learning Irish? Good question. So, I learned Irish in school, and I did not do very well with it. And I kind of rekindled my passion for it while I was like traveling around and learning other languages, and people would ask me, do you speak Irish? And I'd be saying no. So I'd say what the biggest help was definitely the people in the Gaeltacht, firstly. But if you can't travel to the Gaeltacht, I would say my favorite course is Tourist Changa. Tourist Changa, which was a kind of thing you can find on Amazon. It's TURASTEANGA, and that's a course that was kind of led forward by an Irish TV newscast presenter, and I liked it because it kind of went into different aspects of the language. It made it fun, different dialects, included a video, I think. So that is what I used to just initially get into it. And otherwise, if you're in Ireland, then you just go to your local library. You'll find tons of stuff there. So I'd say those kind of random books in the library, flicked through several of them until I eventually found one that happened to be quite useful for me. Okay, and then Kitamura Daichi asked me, do I speak Japanese? I don't speak Japanese. I had a Japanese project, but I do not count it among the languages that I speak because I have not maintained it. So that's why I could say previously that I was able to speak it, but I would not say that right now. Okay? All right. Then Passion for Dreaming says, hey. Hey, Passion for Dreaming. Okay. Then Stratos says, do you speak Greek? I don't speak Greek. We could be playing this game all day long, guys. You could list 5,000 languages. Ask me, do I speak them? The answer is going to be no. I do speak a pretty good number of languages, but there's quite a lot. I think you could play this game with pretty much any polyglot, essentially. So I'll try to stick to the questions here that I can give you guys tips, because I can imagine answering those, which languages do you speak, would go on and on and on. Okay. All right. So, Passion for Dreaming is asking a question that I saw she had wanted to ask me yesterday about if my method for studying languages has changed. So, thanks for this. I appreciate you popping back in after I had said to make sure to ask these in the live chat. So, has my method for studying languages changed when learning an Asian language versus a Romance language? I've studied Romance languages only, and I'm having trouble applying my same method to Korean. Okay, so I have only learned the absolute basics of Thai as my first Asian language, and I've learned a few other ones. Like Tagalog is technically it is definitely an Asian language, but it's not the same level of difficulty, I'd say, when you think about the likes of Chinese, Japanese, and so on. So as I was learning Chinese, which I do consider to be a successful project because I was able to have pretty decent conversations afterwards, even though there's still plenty for me to learn. And when I learned Japanese, which had to get cut short, I would say what I did differently for that was I didn't focus so much on learning how to read the scripts, but I would not advise that you do that for Korean because Korean is a phonetic language. And I know from having studied Arabic that when you're getting into even using a completely different type of script, as long as it's phonetic, you can learn it relatively quickly. So I wouldn't recommend you do that for Korean. Other than that, I would say what the hardest thing would have been for me in learning Asian languages would be the different cultural aspect of it. So I needed to be able to socialize with people. And when I moved to Taipei, Taiwan, to improve to learn Mandarin, the big issue I had was being able to just go out and chat to people for more than, Ireland. So Ireland is Ireland, and it's kind of sounds a little bit like the American way of pronouncing it, Ireland. So it's funny, and I try to see those cognates, even though they're a lot smaller in number, you can still figure them out. And then the new words that you learn tend to have consistent. Hold on. Okay. They tend to have consistent ways of forming words, and I found Mandarin to be more logical in how it would form words compared to French, for instance, where you'd see a new word and not have any idea where it is. The word components tend to be a little bit more logical, so take advantage of that in Asian languages. I hope that answers your question. Okay, so let's see. Next, Holly had suggested a question for me. Let me see. Over on Facebook. Yeah, so Marcus McGinley asked, are you going to intensively learn any new languages or maintain those you currently speak? I am going to, this year for sure, focus mostly on maintaining the languages I currently speak, but I will have very brief projects because I'm going to be going to the Polyglot gathering in Slovakia. So I want to learn a few things of Slovak, which I think I might have a little edge on because I might start remembering some of my Czech, which is very, very close. And then I am going to Iceland at the end of the year for the Polygot Conference, and I might learn a little Icelandish. I can't see those being proper intensive 3-month projects, but I will be doing those. And I think that maybe next year I'll think about a proper intensive project, presuming, because I've been trying to get on top of maintaining my languages. So if I can finally make that time properly this year to maintain my current languages, then I'll be happy with them, and then I'll be able to take on the next big project, because we don't want to get overwhelmed and just keep on taking project after project, because then you lose your languages, and I don't want that to happen to me. Okay, so Joanna von Schaik asks on YouTube, hey Benny, Joanna here. I'm an italki teacher for Dutch and English. I find I do very well teaching intermediate students, but beginners are more difficult. Any advice from a teacher's perspective? Yes, I was a beginner teacher for a very, very long time, as a beginner English teacher, I should say, in Spain and Germany and Italy. And the first thing I would say, which is very hard, but never speak their mother tongue with them. So I took this to the extreme when I was an English teacher in Spain, and while I was getting ready to sit my C2 exam, so my Spanish was pretty good, and I ended up passing and getting the C2 certificate, so my Spanish was at the mastery level. But when I walked into my classroom that paid my bills, I would pretend like I couldn't speak a word of Spanish. And I found that made a huge difference, because a lot of my students, they were just kids. They were like 6 to 10 years old. And if I showed that little bit of understanding, then they would just use Spanish the whole time. But anytime they spoke to me, I actually remember one of my kids was like, "Oye, profe, ¿qué tal sexo ayer con tu novia?" And I had to be like, "I'm sorry, I didn't understand that. Could you say it in English, please?" which was a kind of a weird thing to do in your head, where you know that they're being a little bold, a little naughty, and you don't want to encourage them to do that. But I found that was very effective. So firstly, speak to them only in the language that they are learning. The next thing, if it's children especially, is to try to see, but also with adults, if they're struggling, what are they interested in? What's their specialty? What games do they like to play? So with the kids, I found out that they liked the Spanish version of SpongeBob SquarePants. So I made my lessons kind of go around SpongeBob SquarePants vocabulary, and talk about pineapple houses and so on. And I actually taught them prepositions using that context, like SpongeBob is in the kitchen, and that kind of ties it to them in a way different to how traditional courses would. So talk to your student and see what they're interested in, what they're passionate about, and try to apply that to your language classes. Okay? All right. So, yeah, I'm seeing that we're having connection issues today, and I am really, really sorry about that, everybody. I'm not sure what's going on, but it seems that YouTube is working smoothly today. So check out YouTube, and hopefully it won't get interrupted, and I will investigate the technical issues so they won't happen next time. So sorry about that. Okay, so moving on. Over on YouTube a few minutes ago, DJ D asked, do people ever refuse to speak to you in the language that you're learning and speak in English instead? It has happened a few times, but only when it's obvious that I am an English speaker. So I try to make that less obvious. And one thing I did when I was learning German, for instance, is I actually intentionally made my accent really ambiguous. So it was obvious that I wasn't a German speaker. Like, anyone would know that by hearing how much I'm struggling and how weirdly I'm saying things. But they would not know that I'm that I'm an English speaker, because they just know I'm not a German speaker. So I actually made my German initially sound like it had kind of a French accent. I would use the French R, and if they did speak to me in French, luckily I'd be able to reply in French. But you could try that even if you don't happen to speak the language, or just have some like really ambiguous accent. Ironically, it can help your language learning by not having a good accent in that language as a beginner, and by having that ambiguous kind of just blurry, not your native tongue, not an English speaker. But otherwise, I would just try to make sure they're aware of your story. And whenever somebody would say, oh, let's speak in English, I would tell them how passionate I am about trying to get people to learn languages, and how I'm doing this project because I really want to get to know this culture. And I would try to say that as best as I could in that language. And I think when people see that passion, it changes things, because a lot of people might speak English because they think they're doing you a favor. And the final thing on that point that I would say is, if you are showing yourself as visibly uncomfortable, then people are nice, and they're going to want to help you. They're going to want to help you get past that. And if I'm like, then they're going to just say, let's just speak in English. It's easier. And they think they're doing you a favor, and they're doing it out of niceness. So I just try to be casual and easygoing about it. And I've said on multiple occasions, I think to myself, how would Jack Sparrow speak this language? With like dramatic pauses instead of awkward hesitations. And that makes a big difference, because sometimes it's not that they're refusing to speak to me in their target language. It's that the situation is telling them that maybe it's better and easier if they speak to me in English. And you want to do things that encourage them to do the opposite. So I hope those ideas help you. Okay. So, Nano Jade, 2 streams in 2 days. That's right. And I got more streams on the way. Okay. And Vieira W. Neves asked me about books to learn Spanish. See the live video I did yesterday, and you'll see the long list of timestamps. One of them specifically says about books in Spanish, because I answered the question yesterday. Okay, and let's see. All right, here's a good question that came through on Facebook. This was from Soraya Bowen. What techniques do you use and resources when you're on a limited budget? Okay, so if you're on a limited budget, like I always tell people, if you can, try to get your own private teacher. But if you can't get that, then loads of things you can do. I did go into this also in detail yesterday, but very briefly, I would say try to find apps that are free, the likes of Duolingo, depending on the language. Try to get Anki decks, and you can create these yourself also. If you're getting spoken practice, regardless of how you get that, make a note of the words that are new to you and add them to an Excel file that you can export to become more like familiar with those words over time. Try to go to group sessions, try to find other learners, because they want to practice too, and that way you don't have to worry about like paying somebody or always finding natives that can like maintain their patience and interest, because other learners will be able to do this with you all day long. Go to your local library. You might find some good books. Whenever I'm like I was saying previously, if I'm trying to boost my Irish, I would go back to and I'm back in Ireland, then my local library in my hometown Cavan has loads of books about Irish, and I tend to dive into those. So let me see if okay, I'm gonna go back to a question that Holly suggested for me here. That was on YouTube from Christopher Robinson. Hey Benny, how long did it take you to become fluent in Esperanto? This was not a very difficult project for me, because I'd learned Esperanto after I had learned a bunch of Romance languages, so a lot of vocabulary came in. So I was already conversational within just a few weeks, and each one being an intensive, immersed way of using the language. And in between those, I would like study it a little bit on the side. So I'd say I was fluent, like B2 level, maybe after just like 7 weeks, maybe. It's that easy. It does not take a very long time. I would still not be able to have like a level of depth of conversation that I would in my mastery languages, but you can piece together, if you're a polyglot and you know a bunch of other languages, you can piece it all together to essentially be at that B2 level very confidently in a very short amount of time. So 7 weeks like intensively, and then maybe let's add another 2 weeks to that for the little study sessions I'd have between the intensive weeks. Yeah. So hope that answers your question. So Marcus McGinley asks, are you going to attend the Polygot Conference in Iceland? I am, yes. Just confirming that with Alex Rawlings a few days ago. I still have to decide the topic I'm going to cover, but I wanted to be sure I could make it there. And flights from New York to Iceland are like $100. It's ridiculous. It's the cheap WoW Airlines or whatever. So I've got no excuse to not go. Other than the fact that I'm hopefully running the New York City Marathon 1 week after. But that's a different week, so I can absolutely go, and I'll be seeing you there. Okay. Seth Boa on YouTube asked, what do you think is the biggest difference between learning a language in an academic setting versus teaching yourself? I think I covered this a little bit yesterday, but I'd say the biggest difference, I think yesterday was more about which is better, but the biggest difference I would say is that a lot of your work is also going to be creating your own course structure in a way. So in an academic setting, you could absolutely find a very, very good course that and teacher and exam system that will ensure that you go forward. It's very hard to do that. A lot of them are not ideal. You could potentially do that. But when you are teaching yourself, it has to be entirely self-guided. You have to set up your spoken sessions. You have to give yourself milestones to aim for and be working towards those milestones. Whereas in an academic setting, you have an exam and the pressure looming for that. So you are not only learning the language, but you're also trying to continually motivate yourself to keep at it. And you need to do that as well in academic environments, but at least you have signed up for a class, so you're going to go there. Whereas I find that I have to recreate that kind of setup when I'm learning by myself by scheduling as many italki sessions as I can ahead of time, because then I know I don't want to miss them. So you have to do, I would say that's the biggest aspect, is you have to do a lot of the self-guided aspects of how you're using your time by yourself. But the advantage, of course, is by doing that, it's going to be tailor-made to you. It's going to be ideal for you. Whereas if those decisions are made by somebody else, then maybe it's not the most ideal situation for you. And if you are learning in an academic environment, try to combine that with self-guided learning if you can. Okay. All right. I want to make sure I'm getting through what I can here. So, yeah, I'm seeing some random phrasings of questions here. Someone's like, could you elaborate on your answer yesterday? And I can't really, you gotta ask me a nice simple question. So I'm gonna go back to a suggestion from Holly, and she says, the grand old Trogra asks, love the username there, on YouTube. I'm from Texas, and I'm currently learning Spanish, but I'm learning the formal type of Spanish, so it's much more difficult to communicate with Mexicans here in Texas. Any advice for learning slang? Yeah, in general, when you're learning slang, I find it's easier to do it through books in that language. So if you try to find books about Mexican slang in English, you may find limited resources. But if you try to search for it in Spanish, because if you're learning formal Spanish, then you're going to be able to actually process learning materials in Spanish. Now, if your level is beginner, then you might just have to accept that you're not going to be able to have that level of slang conversations immediately, and you might want to focus on just getting your core Spanish up to a solid intermediate level. Generally, I'm not a fan of learning a lot of the dialect things in the early stages, because I find a lot of the materials that would help you with that are better suited to intermediate learners. So I would try to focus on standard Spanish until you're at an intermediate level. You have a good base to work off, and then learn slang. And I think you'll find when you talk with Mexicans and they see that you're a learner, they'll adjust. The same way I adjust whenever I meet somebody who's learning English. I don't hit them with all of these weird Irish expressions, I can't even hit native English speakers with Irish expressions. So you're aware of that, and you adjust for people's benefit. But they appreciate it. I appreciate when people use Irish slang with me, but I don't expect a beginner to do that. So try to make your beginner Spanish very solid, reach an intermediate level, and then search for materials. There's websites that list Mexican slang words. I'm sure there's loads of books about Mexican slang. You can try to have private teaching lessons that are specifically about slang and trying to improve your slang abilities. So they then make it more. And I've done this in some of my languages. I had teaching sessions where they try to teach me street language, which is always a fun experience. So yeah, those are a few things I would suggest. Okay. So before I go on to Holly's next suggested question, I want to flick through catching up to what I see on my stream here. Okay. Yeah. All right. Ooh. Just making sure I'm seeing all of the YouTube comments. from you guys so I can catch up with those. Okay, so I'll just go straight to Holly's suggestion then, because I see I'll have to flick back in a way to catch up with these. So Thérèse Gilbert asks on YouTube, will you brush up your Quebecois before coming to Montreal? I will. I definitely will. I have lots of resources, especially the guest post on my blog, and I have a book, Le Québécois en 10 leçons. I have my own notes, I think, from the Quebec slang that I like, or the joual that I had learned years ago. And I would definitely, I would prefer to not just use my standard French, but I will actually brush up on my Quebecois before the Montreal event. So yeah, you can bet that will definitely be happening. Okay, I'm going to scroll up here. I want to see how these questions here have developed. Okay, been answering most of these that I could. Yeah. What do you think about Estonian? Okay. That's an example of a question that I'm not really going to be able to answer in a useful way. Okay. Favorite romance. What's your favorite romance language? Portuguese. I kind of explained why yesterday. Okay, what sort of resources do you recommend for something like Russian? Do you think it's worth getting grammar books? Thanks. I would say, Luke, in general for all languages, but including Russian for sure, and I know this from helping Lauren learn Russian, you should not get a grammar book if you're starting off. You should try to speak it as much as you can and interact with people, use the language, get used to it, and then you'll start to absorb grammar naturally over time, but then try to, from there, reach a confident stage where you can get your point across, and then go to those grammar books, but do them a little bit later. Do them as an intermediate level learner. That's what I'd have to say. Okay, Christopher Robinson says, what's it like to go to a Polygot Conference? Good question. So for the YouTube polyglots themselves, I'm sure it's different than for people who are going there for the first time and they don't really know anybody. As a YouTube polyglot, it's a chance for me to see a bunch of people who I've interacted with in many ways over the many years, and I see it as a chance to see lots of friends. So hanging out with them and just talking about whatever, not necessarily language learning, just always seeing people I haven't seen in a long time who I have a lot in common with. For other people, it's a great chance to get to talk about language learning for the first time and get to see people in person and see them talk about what they're passionate about, which can be like many different kinds of subtopics. And I think it's amazing. It's one of my favorite things. I look forward to going to the events this year and seeing all of these great people that I've interacted with online. And of course, meeting people who follow what I do and shaking their hand and giving them encouragement. So yeah, definitely a great experience if you can attend any of them. Okay, so Fuzia Abdallah says, I'm doing the Learning How to Learn course with Barbara Oakley. To improve this, I'm going to give a presentation about learning in my evening English class. What's your advice for me? Okay, for giving a presentation in another language, I would try to prepare it ahead of time and then speak it out loud with people, like maybe just with one person. And in general, what I do to help me remember, because you could be reading it, but it helps your flow if you use some kind of little mnemonic tricks. So when I gave my second TEDx talk, that whole thing was based on a general script that I kind of knew what I was going to say, and I just had mnemonics in my head attached to like different parts of my body. So I would be like, okay, I imagine my hair is on fire, and then fire would be related to the first point that I was making. And I would just kind of keep going down in steps like that. And that's for giving a presentation in general. But when you're doing it in the target language, keep in mind, this is going to be in your English class. They're going to know that you're not a native speaker, so it's okay if you make mistakes. don't be too scared about it. If you slip up once or twice, it's not the end of the world. You're not going to be booed away from your class. So always try to take it easy and not put too much pressure on yourself. Okay? Let's see what else you guys are saying here. Okay, trying to make sure I get to as many questions from people. Oh, we have a lot of people learning Korean in these my chat screens here. Okay. Bobby Lewis says, how many languages is it safe to learn simultaneously? I'm doing 4 now. Well, good for you, Bobby. You are a smarter man than I am. And coincidentally with the same surname. I don't know. I don't know what the limits are, but I personally wouldn't learn more than one simultaneously. But I would maintain one simultaneously. Okay, Therese, I have not covered my Italian library on YouTube. I've shown my Italian books. I don't have an extensive library yet, so I won't be getting to that anytime soon, I think. Okay. So, Leventia XYZ says, how do you maintain languages that you have already learned? Do you practice it in conversation frequently, or do you just maintain them passively? Very good question. And I am very much passionately against like passive learning. I think having like the radio on in the background, or like maybe casually flicking through something as the core of your book, the core of your studying, is not very useful. I think it's way better if you have some really active attention on your language, and it really makes a huge difference. So when I'm actively maintaining my languages, I will have a spoken session coming up that week in the language, and before the session I'll try to revise whatever I've learned, and then after the session I'll try to add those to my like Anki decks, and I'll try to see what were my weaknesses and research them and say, okay, I couldn't really I forget how this grammar point worked, and go off and like look it up in my grammar book or search for it online. But whatever I'm doing is very active, because I think passively it's not as useful. You're not really maintaining. It's not like you have to be putting work in to be even staying at the same level, because language learning is hard even at the maintenance. You have to put hard work in. You can get passive exposure, but all that's doing is practicing your passive exposure skills. So you're not going to be able to speak the language necessarily at the same level that you had at the end of an intensive project. You might be kind of maintaining your ability to understand, but even then, you're not actively trying to make sure you remember words. So I would definitely say to not be focused so much on passive. Try and make everything as active as you can. Okay. And let's see, catching up on what one of these questions that Holly suggested for me was from Alex Worrell, and was, if you have kids in future, what languages will you teach them? Very good question. So I would say English, because we'd be living likely between America and Ireland, so just to be able to talk to our families and live here, so that's a no-brainer. And then Irish. So this one will surprise a lot of people, because they'd imagine that I might pick like Mandarin as a top priority, and be thinking, practically, how many people speak the language? That's the one I'm going to focus on. But again, like culturally, I'd be more thinking about the families they're growing up in, and the backgrounds that they are coming from. And so Irish will be a language that I'm going to make sure my kids know as they're growing up, and they're going to be visiting Ireland and attending Gael talks and so on. And then probably another at least 2 languages, maybe French and Spanish, but that's not something that I'm like 100% sure about. But you can absolutely raise a child to speak 3 or 4 languages, or more if you like, but I think I'll kind of have a nice safe limit, 4 languages. So that's what I'm thinking. And I will obviously think on it more when the time comes. Okay. Is it possible to ladder from one Romance language to another, like Spanish to Italian? Yes, but only if you speak one of them very, very well. So absolutely, transition between those languages, Henry, but make sure whichever one you're using as the ladder language, you are very solid in it. Like, I use French as my laddering language a lot, but only because I'm at the C levels in French, which is a very important distinction. Okay. Let's see. All right, so let me see what else we've been seeing people ask here. So Jelly Beans and the Rockets, official, asks on YouTube, how do you maintain your interest in language learning? I would say, like, what are you passionate about? So in my case, I am passionate about technology and gadgets and gizmos and software. As you guys can see, I'm doing a live session, and I never have things simple. I never just like grab my smartphone and press go live. I have to have like overlays and backgrounds and text here and stream on multiple different platforms, which usually works. Today it doesn't. But that comes with the territory. So that means that when I am using my languages and trying to maintain my interest, I am going to be doing the things that I'm interested in my mother tongue. So I read technical magazines. I watch YouTube channels about the latest trends in technology. I will follow electronic engineering, changes in how chips are made, and read about it in Spanish. So those kind of things that I'm interested in. And otherwise, I like these days. I like playing video games, so I will play the video game in my target language. And you guys can see me doing that on Beam. If you look at Beam and look for Polyglot, right there. Or if you're on Windows 10 with the latest creator update, you'll see like streaming games. Search for Polyglot. If you have an Xbox, then you'll see a Beam streaming option. Search for Polyglot there. You'll see me streaming, and I will, as I get into it, I'll switch the language and just listen to the game come across in that language. So these are the things that you just use the language for on your day-to-day basis, that you do with your mother tongue, that you're passionate about, you're interested in. So why not do it in your target language? And that way you're not going to lose interest. And if you're a beginner learner and you find those things intimidating, then still try to keep it interesting. And I would say maybe try to read some comic books and the like, Okay. So DJ D asks, do you ever stop people on the street if you hear them speak a language you're learning or already speak? On the street, maybe not. Not so much on the street, but at many events, yes. So I was actually at VidCon in Amsterdam a couple of weeks ago, and I was catching up on emails in the hangout room for creators that they have. And while I was doing that, I happened to hear the side of my ear, I could hear Portuguese. And I actually heard two Brazilians talking about how there are no Brazilians at this event. And since the environment we were in it's not the same as the street, it's like a particular community, I feel like there's no problem approaching people I don't know, because even though I don't know them, we have something in common, I know that for sure. And so I just walked up to them and said, in Portuguese, I said, well, there may not be any Brazilians, but there are people who speak your language. Where are you guys from? And talked about the cities they're from and what kind of videos they make. So whenever I'm in those kinds of situations, any kind of social event, and I hear a language, then I will pretty much always, if I'm eager to practice that language, I will try to interact with the speaker if I can. So on the street, maybe the only times I've done that on the street would be when I feel it's genuinely going to help that person. I remember Lauren and I were somewhere, I forget which country it was, but there were some lost French tourists, and I could hear them saying how they really needed to get to the airport, they were going to miss their flight, and I could help them. And I turned to them and I said in French, well, you're in the wrong place because the bus to the airport is a block down that way. and you pay it this way, and you, like, I explained how to get to the airport because I knew, and like they didn't interact with me initially, but I knew they needed help, and I knew I could explain it in French, which might have been quicker for them. So yeah, I would take advantage of that. But otherwise, people in the street, I wouldn't generally just walk up and say, "Hey, I speak your language," because if they might say, "Okay, so," you need some kind of connection. So if you can be helpful in the street, for sure, that's what I'd say. Okay, so Young Jay asks, what to do if all your skills are B2, but your listening is A1? Okay, and just giving you guys 5-minute warning, I'm going to start wrapping up these questions. I hope I've been getting to as many of your questions today as I can. And again, sorry for the technical issues with Facebook not working. I see other things are working. Dimension Land on Twitch has said Irish Beast. I don't know if that's a question. But yeah, so are your skills, when your skills are B2 but your listening is A1? I would say, so for that, you need to have a very focused listening part of your learning system. The best thing I would do for that would be to find the language learning podcasts. If you search my blog, which you can see the URL right there below me, search it for podcasts, you'll see the recommendations I have. And I had this issue, especially with my Mandarin, where I was able to speak about several things, but when people spoke back to me, couldn't really follow it. And I did feel that my spoken level was above my listening level. So I focused on listening comprehension. And I find that these podcasts, the one from Innovative Language especially, that I like to recommend, they already separate into those European Common Framework levels, A1, A2, B1, B2, and so on. So I would start listening at the level I'm at, because they're so easy that I'm going to understand them. And then I would push myself up a notch as much as I can. So I try to make sure I can like push myself a little bit beyond where I am. And I find if I try to listen to like the news in the language and I've just started learning it, it's too hard for me. No amount of time spent doing that is going to really help me. But if I listen to a basic exchange of somebody buying something and they explain how each word works, I'm going to be able to follow that. But if I can already do that, then maybe they'll explain a minute-long exchange and then they'll talk about just the hard parts of it. So it's tailor-made to the particular level you're at. And those language learning podcasts, I can highly recommend them. They'll come in very, very useful. All right. Loyalist Clyde asks, I've been learning French for a couple of years now, and I still can't understand anything being said to me. Any tips or ideas? I'd actually say precisely what I just said, is that this is another listening comprehension issue. So try to focus on your listening comprehension. So try to use those podcasts, or like take a segment of like radio that you can record or audio that you have recorded and play back in slow motion if you can. And this is actually a feature we built into the language hacking French and German, Spanish, Italian books. Was the app that we play the audio for has a slow motion option. So if you find it's too fast for you, then that slowing it down helps you get to grips with it. And sometimes you would understand if only it were spoken slower. So having it forced to be slower will help you get that initial confidence, and then you'll be a little bit more equipped to help yourself when it's spoken a bit faster. Okay. So let's see what else I can answer here in the last couple of minutes. Yeah, how to learn English fast. Speak it all the time, and follow European Common Framework if you have the time for that. Maybe check out the Cambridge exams they have for English levels and try to follow their process. Barry asked for the number one tip for becoming a polyglot. Number one tip, I would say, is to learn multiple languages. True story. Yeah. Turns out that is the best road to speaking multiple languages, is learning to speak multiple languages. That's my roundabout way of saying that I can't really give you a very useful, quick tip for becoming a polyglot. Just learn one language, learn it really well, and when you've got it to a very solid level, then learn the next language. Try not to learn multiple languages at once, unless you're this the Bobby Lewis guy who's like, I can learn like 4 languages like before breakfast. You know, if you're that clever, then absolutely do it. But if you're like me and you don't have a supercomputer for a brain, you're going to want to focus on one language, get it to a good level, then focus on the next language, get it to a good level, and between intensive learning projects, maintain your languages. That's my top tip, I guess. Okay. Yeah, so I think I'm going to wrap this up. I'm sorry if I didn't get to all of your questions today, everybody. I appreciate you checking this out. I do try to do these as regularly as I can, so if your question wasn't answered today, I might be able to get to it at a later time. Otherwise, you can see me later today. I'll be playing the video games that I mentioned. See the link in the top right, beam.pro/polyglot. Just go there, follow me, and you'll see me playing Mass Effect Andromeda. Yep. So a huge thanks to Holly, which, as you can see, she's been updating. Hold on, covering my face here. How do I do this with the camera? There we go. She's been updating the current question topic as I've been speaking them, and she's been making sure to interact with you guys. So a huge thanks to Holly. She helps keep these flowing, and let me know. She let me know about the Facebook being down, and I'm sorry about that. I will see what happened to try to fix it for future. And otherwise, I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you found it useful. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure to click the bell icon on YouTube, because then you'll get a notification of when I'm doing this, and your question can come in earlier, and I'm more likely to be able to answer it then. So yeah, that's essentially today's Q&A. Thank you everybody for coming along. I love it that I get to have so many people come and hang out, and I can give you guys as much encouragement as I can. And I'll make sure to give you more varied versions of these, like my tours of my library. I'll come up with more interesting ideas, not just general Q&As, and you'll see those in your notifications and know whether to come. But if you're watching this in the replay, then look below and you'll see timestamps that you can click to go to the question, whichever it may be. So thanks again, everybody, and happy language learning.